Well, it's good to see everyone here this Lord's Day evening. I'd like to begin our lesson tonight on the tabernacle by telling you the circumstances under which I first came to think about preaching this particular lesson. A number of years ago, when I really had just begun preaching, I had a friend in the area, and we would get together periodically every 2 or 3 weeks and had a Bible study. And we'd pick out some text of the Bible and study through that. We had been studying through the book of Revelation, and we had come very near to the end. In fact, we were over in Revelation chapter 21. And I'd like you to take your Bible and turn there to the 21st chapter of Revelation. We're going to start there, then we're going to go way back to the beginning, and then by the end of our lesson, we're going to come back here to Revelation. Revelation chapter 21. In our Bible study, we were reading this particular text. And I forget whether I was the one reading it or my friend. But we read the first 4 verses here in Revelation chapter 21, where John says, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he shall dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be among them. And he shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall no longer be any death. There shall no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things are passed away." After reading that section, my friend, in an almost hostile voice, said, "What's that doing there?" And I said, "What's what doing there?" And he said, that tabernacle. What's that tabernacle doing in heaven? He said, "That's part of the Old Testament system. That's part of the stuff that was all done away with in the coming of Christ. And so what is that tabernacle doing in heaven?" Well, I spent, I think, about the next 45 minutes telling him what I thought the tabernacle was doing in heaven there. And afterwards, he looked at me and he said, He said, "That's pretty good. I think I'll preach that for my sermon tomorrow." And I thought, well, now wait a minute. If he can get a sermon out of that, maybe I ought to be able to get a sermon out of that too. And so I think both of us the next Lord's Day preached on the tabernacle. And I have been using that sermon for many years since. I want to take just a moment to give you a bit of information about the word tabernacle. You just kind of set it aside, and you'll find a place for it later on in the lesson. The term tabernacle to us inevitably evokes memories of Moses in the wilderness. And we think not just of a tent, but we think of the holy tent, the sacred tent where there was the altar and the Ark of the Covenant was, and the cloud that was there by day and the pillar of fire by night. That just inevitably comes to our mind when we hear the word tabernacle. Because tabernacle is not really a common English word otherwise, but the Hebrew word in the Old Testament, and for that matter, the word in the New Testament, but primarily the Hebrew word in the Old Testament, did not necessarily connote a holy tent. It just meant a tent. A tent, a portable type of dwelling place made out of curtains and poles that was collapsible and you could move it. And it might or might not have a sacred purpose. If it was a tent for a god to dwell in, then yeah, it would have a sacred purpose. But if it was a tent that anybody else dwelt in, it's just a tent. But they use the same word all the time. It didn't necessarily mean anything holy. Basically, it referred to a dwelling place, a place that you live. And they could use it as a verb as well as a noun. We only use the word tent or tabernacle really as a noun, but they could use the equivalent either way. I don't know if little Jewish boys ever went camping or not in the Old Testament, but if they did, I suppose one little boy could have said to his mama, "Can Ellie and I go tabernacle tonight?" And they wouldn't mean anything other than go pitch tent out there and live in a tent tonight. Now, I say that, you just keep that in mind. that the term tabernacle refers to a tent, the idea of tent dwelling, living in a tent.